beyond ideas of wrongdoing and right doing, there is a field. I'll meet you there. When the soul lies down in that grass, the world is too full to talk about. Ideas, language, even the phrase each other doesn't make sense. Hi everyone. Justin is one of those people whom I liked the first minute I met him. I found him really intriguing. I always enjoyed listening to him whenever we saw each other, but I was always just one of the people in the group. I think I found his keen intellect quite intimidating. It took a while before I approached him one-on-one. Today I am very happy that I pushed to make a friend of him. Although he moved away from Somerset West, I enjoy staying in touch with him and I keenly follow him on social media. It was when I saw pictures of him in the Okavango Delta that I realized that the time has come to pin him down for a Meet Me in the Field chat. It was my own jealousy that made me want to speak to him. With nature being my higher power, I really wanted to find out if and how nature has an effect on his spiritual life. This podcast is supported by the first layer, the 12-step workbook on working through the 12 steps in any addiction in 21 sessions. There is also a 24-day step coaching and counseling program available based on the first layer. For more information in this regard, go to www.freddy.org.za and click through from the notices at the right of the homepage. This is Justin's story. Sit back and enjoy. Justin, how are you doing?
Yeah, very good. Thank you, Freddie.
I'm very glad to hear that. Welcome to Meet Me in the Field on this most glorious Saturday afternoon.
Yeah,
From the angle that I'm sitting, I can see a part of Table Mountain. Or that will be... That's not Lion's Head. What is that? That's the
Devil's Peak.
That's Devil's Peak. So I'm looking at Devil's Peak as we're speaking. And there's not a cloud in the sky. There's a huge crane, but and not a beautiful bird crane like in a balding crane.
Cape Town.
Justin, how long have I known you?
It would be going on about, must have been 2.5 years back.
Okay.
2 to 3 years ago.
Cool.
Yeah.
And I got to know you in Somerset West.
That's right.
You moved back to Cape Town for a job.
That's right.
And that is how I decided that I need to talk to you for Meet Me in the Field, because number one, I became viciously jealous when I saw your pictures of the Okavango Delta on Facebook, and I thought, this is not fair. This is my biggest bucket list item, and there you are. So you're working in travel.
Yes, yeah, I work in
and you
travel
seem to be thriving in it. Is this something you were ever interested in?
Yeah, it's not something that I ever thought I would be involved in, certainly not from the aspect that I am. I think, but strangely enough, looking back, kind of all the little steps and missteps along the way, I can definitely see how they equipped me for this job specifically. But it wasn't ever something that when I was younger I thought, this is what I'll do.
I want to be in travel.
Yeah, I don't think a lot of people go think about it in that sense.
Yeah.
I mean, you think everybody wants to travel. It's the thing that you see listed if somebody's got a bio, it's, I want to travel. But to actually find a means to do it and to make it part of your livelihood, I think that's quite rare. And it's very, very grateful for that.
What did you want to be when you grew up? When you grew up, good God, Freddie, your tenses.
Yeah. Wow, that's a good question. I can't ever remember having a distinct idea. I think I was always quite open to things, and for me, I think when I got to the point where I was having to make decisions around that, I studied, etc. I always tried to keep it as open-ended as possible. So I never wanted to restrict possibilities for myself, which I think ironically ended up restricting possibilities for myself because I didn't want to step in any direction. So I ended up just standing still. So this job, in many ways, it was also a commitment to that, to actually being able to follow through and being able to, no matter which way it takes me, to stay the course. And it seems to be working out quite well so far.
Why do I get the feeling, or do I actually know this, that you studied philosophy?
I did, yeah.
Cool. Okay, so I knew it. It wasn't.
Yes.
It's not a kind of a mystic feeling.
No. So I did philosophy. I did politics. My kind of towards the end of it, focus was on political theory, with a little bit of philosophy. Actually, strangely enough, now the area that I focus on in travel, Southern Africa, was my area of focus within studies as well. But that was just coincidental. That's really wasn't. I never. When I was doing all of that, I had no awareness around the travel aspect. So it's all very new knowledge to me. This journey is very much a new chapter. Yeah.
Have you started thinking of combining your travel experience and knowledge with future studies?
Sure, that's a good question. Not at this stage. Oh, actually, you know what? I really have studies in a very different direction. Not in the traditional academic sense that I'm used to, but I have already started investigating, doing things like field guide studies. There's the Fagasa.
Nice.
Exactly. So that's what I'm wanting to do, and you just start, because I go to these different places, and I'm on safari vehicles a lot. You start picking up little things here and there, and it's definitely an interest of mine. I don't think I'll ultimately be a guide, but it's for self growth, self-enrichment.
You just reminded me that I went through a phase of my life where I wanted to become a game ranger.
Oh, really?
I wanted to be a wildbewaarder.
Okay.
I completely forgot about that. My first memory is I wanted to become a king.
Okay. Not ambitious
and
at all.
And I always jokingly say, and then I became a queen. So I didn't end up too far away from that. And then the next one was a wildbewaarder.
Yeah, that's fascinating.
And then in standard 6, I think we had to read a book, this prescribed book. If you want somebody to hate something, prescribe a book on it at school.
Yeah.
And then we had to read die dagboek van 'n wildbewaarder, from the diary of a game ranger.
Yes.
And I hated the book.
Really?
I hated it.
Yeah.
And that put me off game ranging.
Yeah, I think
forever.
I think it's an interesting one, because that's even in the field of game rangers, what I've come to realize is it goes so many different directions. And you mentioned kind of seeing photos and that of me in the Okavango Delta, also realizing how people on their own journeys will move from game ranging into maybe personal game ranging, and then it'll be more media-based kind of social influences around that field, and then go into conservation awareness.
I just want to say the conservation thing should be...
Absolutely, yeah. So that's a big part of it, and it's also in terms of the places that I'll use in my job for clients and guests. They in turn are very into conservation, and so it's a very it's a vibrant field to be in, and it's something that you can easily get passionate about. I mean, just yesterday we had somebody in here from Namibia, and he was talking about all these projects that they're putting in place, and it's really it's inspiring stuff. I think a lot of colleagues don't really see it that way. They're more about just the day-to-day job, but for me, I can see how down the line there are options available to me to not necessarily stay stuck in this one position. So in a weird way, that earlier thing that I always had of not wanting to step in any direction to close off options, I found that by committing, you're actually opening up those options. So
one of those paradoxes of life.
Yeah, exactly.
Lovely.
Yeah.
Just thinking about it, probably about this time, in 2 weeks' time, I'll be arriving at a private game reserve for a week holiday.
Oh, fantastic.
Yes.
Where are you off to?
If you ask me the name of the place, I'm going to lie because I don't know. But it is on the Limpopo River. Okay. So if you sit on your stoep, you look into the Kruger.
Okay, beautiful.
Yeah. A friend of mine called me in March on my birthday, and she said, I've got this week timeshare and I don't want to go alone, so can I give you a birthday gift of a game lodge holiday?
Amazing.
And I was humble enough to say, yes, I'll appreciate.
No.
Yes, I'll accept.
I'll do that.
Yeah, I'll do that. Okay. So I'm so excited.
Yeah,
I'm so, because for me that has become the ultimate in a spiritual space for me.
Yeah.
So talk about spirituality. Looking at your photos of your recent trip, there was such a sense of you belonged. And that's what made me think I want to talk to you. Do you feel, is nature part of your spirituality? Where do you stand spiritually?
Yeah, it's actually funny. I just got little chills when I was thinking about that space and being there. I mean, where I stand spiritually is, I think, just a bit of background, is I came from a very from a Methodist home, but in terms of religion, so not spiritual side of things, but a very soft and gentle
Here in Cape Town, or where did you grow up?
Cape Town, yeah. So I grew up in Cape Town, and I think
Okay.
traditionally it's a little bit more liberal, a little bit more open-ended than perhaps other parts.
Central Methodist Mission, or
No, this was the Methodist Church in Pinedon, so
Okay.
that was where I kind of
cool?
hailed from. But at a very young age, and you mentioned my interest in philosophy, I found myself moving away from the church. It didn't account for many of the answers questions that I had, and I think a lot of people in this day and age find themselves in a similar position. So I started exploring other avenues, and I considered myself an atheist for many years. Yeah.
I'm going to interrupt you there, but I can see you kind of being a little pain in the arse in class.
Yeah, I think I was.
Asking all the difficult questions that a teacher would prefer not to answer.
That was me, yeah.
Oh God, I could see that,
100%.
yeah.
I mean, it's strange because I don't ever think I was a bit of a paradox, I guess, in that sense, is I was never a belligerent rebel questioner, but I always had the questions.
You wanted to know.
I just wanted to know.
And teachers will see that as arrogant and
Yeah.
counterproductive.
Exactly,
Yeah.
and I think they get offended sometimes
Yes.
if you're asking questions that they can't answer, either unable to answer or that flow against what they
Exactly,
feel.
yeah. What's in the curriculum?
Exactly, what's in the curriculum. So that was kind of my background, and that's where I found myself. But I have definitely found sort of a place now for my spiritual side, and I tend to find myself, and again, I think this is in keeping with how a lot of people experience it, is in nature. And so I do a lot of hiking, spend a lot of time outdoors. Specifically, when I'm going to these destinations that I'm going to, a lot of what I do revolves around wildlife and safari life, if you will. There's something about that kind of getting back to basics and being able to just see life, the cycle of life, unfettered, not with all the pretense and the stories that we
filters.
Exactly, and it's crazy. I mean, I was watching a documentary a little earlier today about this kind of thing, is how in society, and in China I think they're doing it now, is they're starting to allocate points for your social rating, if you will. And people get denied denied bus passes, or get denied certain entry, or based on this rating, which is fairly arbitrary. And I feel like a lot of the way that we live our lives, whether consciously or unconsciously, has come to revolve around these ratings that we feel, or these kind of how we think other people are perceiving us.
Yes.
And that can take place on so many levels. It can take place on an interpersonal level in the flesh. It can take place through social media. But I just find that when I get into those spaces, all of that largely falls away, and it's really a great kind of leveler and a great grounder, and just gives you perspective. So it definitely catapults you back into that space of where I really stand in the grander scheme of things. And I think also for me, what I noticed this most recent trip that I did, which was a little bit of a longer one, is because I live in the city and all my activities take place in the city, I work in the city, is the constant kind of buzz and noise that's happening in the background with just life, with human life going on. And that can be very overwhelming. And I think you notice it when you've been away and you come back into it. It can be very overwhelming. And then you kind of adapt to it and you settle back into the mode.
Yes.
So this time around, it was quite an adjustment for me to realize that this is all taking place, because there's nothing you can really do about it.
Yes.
And you can kind of try and find your touchstones. And I think in terms of spirituality, that's something that I have gone back to again after a bit of a hiatus, is meditation, and just trying to create a space where that quietness can be allowed back in a little bit. It's still difficult when you've got cars outside and the refrigerator buzzing and this and that, but just to try and consciously focus in on that zone is, I think it's more than just, it doesn't just add to my life, it's necessary for me to maintain the level. I can not do that for periods and stretches at a time, but I definitely go off kilter, and I sit and I feel unwell, and I feel irritable, and I feel like something isn't right. So the best things can be happening, but if I'm not doing those things, I definitely don't feel as if I'm in a great space. Yeah.
So am I hearing correctly that meditation is one of your spiritual practices?
Absolutely, yeah. It is. It's been an interesting journey with that. It's always sort of since I started adapting a spiritual way of life, that's been a central tenet. But I also, I found with meditation that I slipped into a kind of a comfortable zone where I was really just checking boxes. So I'd wake up in the morning, I'd do my kind of say this little mantra that I say, and then meditate. But it would be, I wouldn't really be present, and slowly the time, sort of allocate 25, 30 minutes for that. The time that I was actually being able to focus in on it, or not focus rather, just gradually depleted to the point where I would be kind of getting up and going to brush my teeth, or I usually do it in the morning, or going to do other things without even realizing that I'd stepped out of the space that I created for myself. So I think it's an ongoing thing to kind of recalibrate. Yeah.
I was so excited this morning. I use a meditation app called Insight Timer, and this morning's meditation, I'm half OCD, so I go down the list of meditations. So this morning the guy said, you can either follow his voice or you can let your attention drift. And I was kind of, yippee! Because I work so hard at keeping my attention following the voice that I suppose I nearly feel anxious in the meditation space. Yeah. So this morning, I was given the freedom for the attention to drift. And actually the voice kept me quite involved. Anyway, just the freedom to let my attention go allowed me to actually focus on the
which is interesting.
on the meditation.
Yeah, it is interesting that you say that, because I'm a very, very fixed thinker, and I oftentimes feel if I haven't done something all the way, or what I deem to be in that moment all the way, then I haven't done it. But that's really the journey, generally speaking, it's really not about that.
Exactly.
It's not about doing it right.
Yeah, it's about the doing.
It's about the doing. Exactly.
Totally so.
It's the practice. So, so I think that's also, with where I'm at, that's very much part of it now, is kind of that acceptance of, I'm never going to have this perfect balance, I'm never going to have this perfect structure, but I can try and orient my life in such a way where I'm doing things that promote that feeling in me and allow me to drift in that space. And certainly for me, the travel's been a big part of that. It's been coming in increasingly, and on the flip side of it, it does mean I work exceedingly hard, too much, definitely too much, in order to be able to have those opportunities. But it's something that I came into this job knowing that I would do. I very consciously said to myself, new career for 2 years, I'm going to give it my everything. And I was in a position to do so. I was single, and I had that time to allocate to it, and kind of getting my life back up and running. So but now I think that you can only do that for so long. You can only focus in on one thing for so long before you start feeling the lack of in other areas of your life. It's a tricky one.
It's like life. Find balance. We need to try to find some form of balance. When you're traveling and when you're out in these, let's call it bundus, do you also take time to meditate?
Yeah, so I have done it. It's not a definite. So I sometimes do, I sometimes don't. I was actually very fortunate on my most recent, and this is interesting, trip. I got the opportunity to go with my cousin. Well, I invited him along. He's actually also, strangely enough, philosophy. He's
oh my word!
Yeah, recently resigned philosophy professor. He was at UCT.
Oh my word!
Yeah, with quite a young family, and contrary to popular belief, academics work really, really hard
and earn little money.
Money. So they.
I know. I'm married to one.
Okay, there we go. So you're well aware. So it's long hours. It's very high expectations. I think particularly around the climate in South Africa at the moment, and you're always on a bit of a knife's edge, walking on eggshells around what you can and can't say, can and can't do. So it was just fortuitous that my cousin found himself in this place where he happened to be available.
Oh, fabulous!
Yeah, and it's very. You think if you offer, you mentioned that you're taking up this opportunity to go away, but you think if you offer somebody a trip as such that they necessarily would just be like, oh, I don't know, I'll drop everything, but that's not life.
Exactly.
Suddenly disappear for 2.5 weeks is not easy,
especially with a wife and children. So,
especially when
honey, I got this opportunity.
That's it. Yeah.
So when we're going, no.
Yeah. My philosophy with these kinds of trips now has very much been to try and get friends and family, kind of people who are in for the long haul. It's easy to kind of drift off in the romantic, because it's a romantic idea, but
absolutely.
at the same time, I think the couple of people that I've taken who otherwise may not have been able to go, it's been just to see that kind of them experiencing it has been something else. So he got to go with me, and he recently has very much immersed himself in kind of mindfulness meditation.
Oh, cool.
And so he was doing that, and he does yoga and all of that. So he was going about it during the course of the trip, but I was very much not feeling it in that way. Like for me, the way that I found it is, so not in terms of allocating a set time as I normally would have done for, say, meditation. What I would find is that moments of solitude, not designated moments of solitude, but where I would find myself in a quiet space, or not even, I mean, there might be other people around, but sitting on a boat, like on the Zambezi River, just with the quiet, really, and being able to kind of allow that to take place. And it's very easy. And I think this is why travel is such a huge thing for people, because it really puts you outside of your patterns of behavior, puts you outside of those things, those constructions that you've built up, and kind of throws you into a completely new environment. So while our minds are very strong and try to pull us back in that direction, if you make an effort to open up to it, I think that's why it's so easy to find that spiritual side of things. It's probably what you saw in those photos. Yeah, so that's really how it's been for me recently.
Something else I'm hearing is, and the picture I had was, there's a poem, and I can't remember who wrote it, called Winter. And in the poem, the poet refers to winter as the paragon of art. Because what winter does is it strips, let's take a tree, it strips the tree of all the leaves and all the bullshit. And what you're left with is the pure basics. And that makes it the paragon of art, because you show what's really there. And it's nearly as if I hear you saying that this is what nature does for you, what spirituality is for you, is to strip away the bullshit.
Yeah.
And to be left with the raw basics.
Absolutely.
And that connects you to you.
Yeah, that's a fantastic, I mean, that's pretty much spot on the way that I see it. It allows you to cull away all that nonsense, and it's very easy. And I mean, this is possibly a downside to the job that I do, is that you are in an office environment. There's it's quite a high pressure job. There's lots of money involved, obviously, and tight deadlines and all of that. But also just, I'd never been in a traditional office space before prior to coming into this job, ever. It had always been fluid and outside of the space. I worked in film for quite a while, so my office
Talk
space,
about fluid.
Yeah, exactly. Literally, office is a different place every other day. So coming into this environment, it was a huge learning curve for me, and it put me well outside of my comfort zone, because I, at various points in my life, have kind of detached from everything and wanted to just bubble and be away from people, and I think maybe, I mean, oddly now, when I say it like that, maybe kind of trying to search for that, like you just, that bare tree, if you will, but being stuck in a zone where you're unable to access that, to really do the necessary kind of stripping needed. So anyways, but in terms of the office space, it can get quite nitpicky, it can get quite cynical, it can get quite just people, it's people doing what people do. So you do that for a few months at a time, it can be quite easy without any kind of pressure valve release. You can really start to feel it and start feeling like, I don't really want to, not that I don't want to go in today because of the work. Like I'm very passionate about my work and creating these trips for people, but it's just like, that person's just walked in the door. I wonder what it's going to be today. It's going to be some sigh. I can hear the sigh. I can see the walk, anticipating the drama. And before anything's even happened, your day is kind of off to a bad start. The opportunity to kind of get away from that for a little bit is good.
Strip that.
Yeah, to strip it off. To strip away and like start afresh and start anew. And it's again, I said before, coming back this time was different because I was acutely aware of not only sights and sounds and that, but also noticing how I myself would mold back or shift back into that other place. So it's really not, I don't think you can go off and kind of find Zen and then just carry it with you. It's a very active thing. I wish it were that way. But yeah, it's that's been something that's kind of been flagged with me, and it's It's also now it's 3 weeks, I think, since I got back. So when you asked me to do this, I thought, what a wonderful kind of opportunity and reminder of that side of life. Yeah.
A question I can't get out of my head is, did you ever tell your parents the way you started feeling about religion?
Yeah, so I was very fortunate. I was in a little bit of a tricky position with that. So my dad was quite sickly through much of my teenage years, and I do remember at various points struggling with various forms of cancer, and then a bone marrow transplant a little bit down the line. But I do remember, it's weird, I haven't actually thought about this, but I do remember there was a significant moment where I wanted to kind of formally say, you know what, I'm not going to do this anymore. It's not for me. But kind of waylaying it out of not concern, but respect. I just didn't want to.
You don't want to upset somebody.
Exactly, who's not. But I think actually in retrospect, my folks were never like that. So I was very fortunate, and it was never a case of them ramming down my throat.
Is it? Okay.
It was more of a gentle sort of, this is the way that we view things, and they also, I think, maybe being versed in other areas of recovery as such, they had an understanding that, or rather that they were open to other forms of spirituality outside of the mantle of religion.
Okay.
Yeah, and they were never
The picture I've got in my head, sorry, I can't help this, is kind of, Mom, Dad, I've got something to tell you. What is it, my son? I'm gay. No, I'm just joking. I don't believe in Jesus.
The big jump.
Which one will go down okay?
Yeah, exactly. No, and I think with my folks, I mean, I really was blessed in this sense, is I think that they would, irrespective, I could have told them kind of anything, and they would have been loving and supporting. So I was very lucky in that way.
Yeah.
It was never, there was never a defining moment where I did it. I think it was just more kind of an easing away from that way of looking at religion. I maybe was quite vocal about it, but their response was never harsh.
Never judgment. You are going to burn in the warm fires of hell.
Absolutely. I think my parents, I mean, in many ways, it's interesting because I think my dad, especially, and I made mention of the fact that of his various stage of illness, I mean, and I think through all of that and kind of through facing his own mortality as such, came to develop a very, very almost Buddhist-like view of the world. So he still had his mode of accessing spirituality, but he was very kind of at peace with the fact that ultimately we're all going to the same point. Ultimately, it's all the same kind of, there are many routes to the mountaintop idea. It's not, there's no one set way that we need to go about finding this thing, whatever this thing might be to you. I think it's more what gives you that sense of peace and ease and whatever speaks to you in that way, pursue that and kind of see where it goes.
Another thought that popped into my head now is, now Justin is a teenage boy, and with what I'm hearing is a father who's very ill. Surely that must also put you in touch with your own mortality at a very young age in your life.
Yeah. I mean, I definitely think that I've always been that sort of thinker. I've always reflected very deeply on things and been very sensitive to that. So yeah, in turn, it's almost weird as I kind of rebelled a little bit against that notion of mortality. Certainly in my early 20s and through my 20s and kind of late teens as well, I had a very much a devil-may-care attitude, and I think that was how it manifested. My experience of that was kind of like, you know what's the point anyways? Ultimately, this is where we're going to wind up. Yeah. And I mean, I recognize now that I was grappling with far deeper issues than what I understood at the time. Yes. And I think a lot of people do. And you adapt an approach that's at the time best suited to kind of speaking to those that malaise or whatever it is, those issues or that discontent that you feel. Yeah, and for me, unfortunately, went down kind of darker path, trying to find a remedy to those feelings, knowing that I wanted to embrace life, but I didn't quite know how to do it because all I really saw around me was not just unhappiness, just not. Yeah, I mean that's the easiest way to put it. I think is just an unhappy world, really, and it can be difficult. I mean, even now, it's kind of on the other side of that period of my life. It's easy to get drawn back into viewing things in a negative frame.
Because you're now kind of going to my next question.
Yeah.
So, are you connecting with a happiness now?
It's a strange thing. I think. So I'm answering this in a roundabout way. I think.
Go for it.
What's changed?
You're a philosopher. We'll indulge you.
I think what's changed is my notion of what that happiness is, and that it is no thing at all, and that I think a lot of my issues came about in life because I was dichotomizing in that way. I was going, on the one side we have good and bad, and on the other side we have bad, and we have the right and we have the wrong. There's a correct way of doing things and an incorrect way, and either I'm happy or I'm sad. And I think what I'm coming to realize, and it's still very much part of the journey that I'm on, is that I can find through something that might traditionally be seen as sadness, so a period of pain or hardship, and that might be externally inflicted, or it might be internal. More often than not, that's coming from within me because something's not happy there. But even within that, there is the kernel of something which could grow into something broader than that allows me to be at peace rather than happy. Because I think happy is, I mean, it's a very, very relative term. I was happy at some of the worst times in my life because I was doing silly things. And I really was.
You got the adrenaline pumping and you thought the adrenaline rush was happiness.
Exactly.
Yeah, exactly.
So what I guess now, what I'm happy, I can say that today, which is different to how it was in the past, is that I'm functional on a social level, which I never was. I can entertain goals and ambitions, which I never allowed myself to previously.
Sorry, I heard goals, G-R-R-L-S, and ambitions. I thought, okay, is he being sarcastic? Is he being nasty? And then I realized, okay, you said goals.
Goals, yes.
For a minute, my head went a completely different way.
Yeah, no. Well, yeah, that's it. But I think it's just I'm kind of in a very different realm to the one that I ever was, or one that I ever thought that I would be in. Yeah, I don't know. It's weird. In life, it's always this kind of, I always pursued the very edge of life. I always wanted to be living on that edge because I thought that was where happiness was, and I thought that was where it's also, especially, it goes back to my earlier point about in the world today, the way that people construct their identities for others on display. It's very easy to think that what you're seeing on the Instagram feed, or what you're seeing in somebody's Facebook posts, or what's being projected, it's kind of like everybody's celebrities traditionally would have a PR agent, or that it's everybody's become their own PR agent, but kind of don't get to see what's behind the scene because that's all that they're trying to show the world. So I think being aware of that, and that's something that I can be drawn into sometimes, and kind of I need to on one level for work, but I also definitely think that a large part of trying to move towards, and I found that I've been most content in life when I'm able to let go of that stuff. And it kind of comes full circle back to what we were saying about when you asked me about being out in nature and being at peace. Is when I'm able to let go of that stuff, that feeling that I've got to cater to impositions that I think society has put on me, which are actually impositions I put on myself. Mm-hmm. As soon as I can let that go, I tend towards whatever the notion of happiness is, I guess. Comfortability more with life.
What I'm hearing is a word you've actually said, and that nearly sounds like Are you old enough to remember a movie, The Unbearable Lightness of Being?
Yeah, I've actually read the Milan Kunderas book.
Is it?
Yeah.
Okay. So what I'm hearing you saying is that for you, life has become the contentness of being. Happiness for you is contentness, to be okay where you are, to be okay with what is, to be okay with where you are physically as well as spiritually, as well as mentally, as well as physically.
Absolutely.
And if you can find contentness there, then you found the happiness.
Yeah, exactly. That's exactly it. And I think it also echoes another book, which I think now in pop culture has become quite big. I was actually given it by a family member right around the time where you and I had met, and just found it very, very powerful and relevant, which is Man's Search for Meaning, the Viktor Frankl book.
Okay. Wow, that's not easy reading.
No, it's heavy reading, but it's definitely...
You can write a synopsis, I'll read that. The synopsis in understandable terms.
Yeah, no, it does. It wavers off a little bit in these, but I think the central takeaway for me was very much that irrespective of what the conditions are that you're living under, it's not to say that you need to try and alter your conditions if you're in there, if you're able to, but there's a way of framing it. It all comes down to the way that we frame our lives. And that contentness will arise from that framework. So Absolutely. If I'm constantly imposing a framework of negativity and a framework of less than and a framework of not good enough, then I find myself in a discontent and unhappy place. If I'm able to see that, and this is really where I found the periods of the most spiritual growth in my life have come about, where I've been able to, on a day-to-day basis, go when faced with a difficult situation that I otherwise would frame negatively and that I would immediately kind of react to and take personally and be sensitive about. If I'm able to, and it's rare, I'm by no means a master at this, if I'm able to look at that situation and go, what is the message, how does this fit in the broader scheme of things? And to just give a little bit of perspective to it, ask that, and also ask, how important is it really, Yeah,
in 10 years' time, how important is this situation today? Yeah,
and I think that's also a benefit, possibly, of getting older. I'm now in my early 30s, and that's something I think that's experience, really. And it's not to say that younger people don't have that, but the more times that you go through that kind of thing, and you're able to see that it's relative, that what you deem to be, because I was the hopeless romantic when I was a teenager, and I was the deep and what's the word for it, the kind of brooding, that would describe me perfectly to a T. I was very brooding, and even today I can slip back into it, but I do find that as I'm moving along, I'm kind of letting go of that need to really intensify everything. And sometimes and increasingly I'm finding that I can be stuck in a situation, and just recently one comes to mind is I've been engaged in a romantic involvement, and very intense, and as it always is with me. And what kind of took place is that there was the same predictable behavior from the other person's side and from my side almost, and getting back into the same path. But then I just said, you know what, I'm stopping this in its track. I'm not doing it this way again. And then was almost immediately able to laugh about it. Not laugh about it, you've got to be careful about how you go about that. But I was definitely... There was an immediate lightness of being, ironically. So it's this, you let go of that need to hold on to the unhappy parts of life. And when I'm able to actually focus in on that and do that, that catapults me back towards kind of the source, if you will. Yeah.
I used to think that cynicism was a part of my intellectuality until I learned fairly recently that cynicism was what contributed to my depression.
Absolutely, yeah. No,
and I really thought cynicism was kind of an intellectual exercise that I played with. What I didn't realize, it was keeping me in a spiral, and I needed to break that.
Yeah.
But Justin, this was absolutely bloody awesome. We talked much longer than I thought we would.
Oh dear.
But time just flies when you're having fun. Or as a friend of mine always says, time flies when you're in a coma. But this was more the having fun part. Thank you so very much. I really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Have a wonderful rest of your afternoon.
Thank you. Same to you.
I really love what I do. I always feel a rush of excitement when I finished chatting to someone for Meet Me in the Field. And I love editing the chats. Reliving those special conversations is such a magic time for me. I am truly jealous of the trips that Justin gets to take for his work. But I want to make it clear, I want the trips, not the hard work that he has to put in to go on the trips. He seems to visit amazing places in nature and post the most beautiful pictures. Those make my toes curl with jealousy. I'm really happy to hear that Justin is content with life and that he seems to enjoy the demands of city and professional life. I wish him all of the best personally, professionally and spiritually. May he only grow from strength to strength. If you want to know more about what I do, please feel free to connect with me on my website, which is www.freddie.org.za, or find me on Facebook at either Meet Me in the Field or Freddie Counselor or Freddie van Rensburg, or on Twitter at RensburgFreddie, or Instagram at Freddie Counselor. Remember that Freddie is always spelled with an IE at the end. I want to thank Justin for his time and for sharing his journey with Meet Me in the Field. Thank you for listening. Be safe. Bye.